Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. I've got an interesting gun on the table. It's a 1911, it's a Sig Sauer 1911, and it's chambered in 22. These are no longer made by Sig Sauer, but they continue to be made by GSG in various formats. So if you end up liking what you see, which I'll tell you, everybody that's fired this gun has loved it and wanted one. Got this when they were still being sold under the Sig Sauer name. And effectively it's a full-size 1911, chambered in 22, works just like a 1911, all of the same characteristics of it. Even the weight, it's 35.2 ounces, so it's not even a light gun, which makes sense. They were designed for training purposes. They were designed to work just like a 1911. Oops, much lighter slide, and of course it's unloaded. This has been an exceptionally fun gun to shoot, whether it's the Sig Sauer version or the GSG version. Now when it was on the Sig Sauer name, they were selling for Sig Sauer prices, which they didn't sell all that well, mainly because of that. People would buy them because they wanted the Sig Sauer name, but the GSG gun was a couple $100 less. And at one point Sig Sauer decided that these weren't selling, we had too many of them, we had a warehouse full of them, time for them to go. So they started giving these away for free if you bought any other Sig Sauer. Well, at that point, they ended up finding out people really did want them. They just didn't want them at the regular price, and they ended up giving away more than they had. So they had to fire up a manufacturing line and make more just to give them away to fulfill those obligations. So it's kind of an interesting chapter in Sig's marketing history. But if you've got one of these, you'll really enjoy it. If you get one of these, you can't go wrong with it. You also could do quite well with the GSG version. If you want the Sig Sauer version, they're still available. People have got them new in box, $300 to $500. You can get the GSG version for about $300 brand new. So let's talk about this thing a little bit. As I mentioned, it's a full-size 1911. It has standard 1911 grips. These are the rosewood grips that came with it. So these are the grips that were on it when we got it. And they're really nice looking grips. They're comfortable, nicely rounded with a little bit of texture on them. It came with these yellow 3-dot sights. Some of the variations also had white 3-dot sights. Kind of varies depending on what generation it was. And depending on your eyes, these can be very easy to see. I have a really easy time seeing these. Hammer has a little less ease seeing them and would prefer white ones. But overall, they are easy to work with. And if you don't like them, they're dovetailed, front and rear, and you can swap them out. So you can end up putting whatever sights you want on it, which is unique for a 1911. Most 1911s have pinned front sights or actually staked, so you have to use a special tool to change them out. These are dovetails, so regular sight pusher. Overall, it works like a 1911, has a grip safety like a 1911, a really significant beaver tail. You're not going to get slide bit by this thing, and a very easy to operate thumb safety, up, down. So it's easy to operate that thumb safety with kind of an extended safety. And where you grip it, it's far enough above you that you're not going to hit it with your hands as you're operating the gun. It's not an ambidextrous gun other than the safety. The other controls are on the other side, but it does have an ambidextrous safety. And I'll show you these. The takedown procedure is a little bit weird, but not actually that bad. Overall, it's easy to work with. Firing it is a pleasure. There is absolutely no recoil. You pull the trigger, it makes a noise, a hole appears in the target, and that's about all that happens. With the weight of it and the ergonomics of it, it's super easy to control. So if you're trying to show somebody you're taking a new person out and you want to show them how to shoot, this is a really good way to do it. It does have a magazine disconnect, so these 10-round magazines, which actually are quite robust and heavy, they've got a little pin here to grab with your thumb to pull it down to load them. But you do have to have a magazine in it to operate the trigger. I'm going to put an empty magazine in it and lower the trigger, or lower the hammer. And it does, notice it's got a skeletonized hammer and a skeletonized trigger. It's actually kind of cool. Not that you'd necessarily go into competition with this. But what I do have here, these are snap caps. These are inert dummy rounds, so I'm going to chamber one of these so I can actually pull the trigger, because on a 22 you don't want to dry fire it. There are a few exceptions to that, but most 22s you really don't want to dry fire. So now we've got a snap cap in there. It's got your typical 1911 trigger, minimal take up, it's a straight back pull, and then a super short light break. Very, very nice trigger. If you're familiar with a 70 series 1911 trigger, this is exactly what you get. And you notice that little screw sticks out there. There's an over travel stop, so you can adjust the over travel. It's right down there at the bottom of the bottom hole right there. Now the key to that is if you adjust it too tight, you may get occasionally where it won't break. If you adjust it too sloppy, you'll have excess over travel. You get it just right, which this one currently is, and it'll stop right after the break, and then when the gun cycles, you're ready to go again. So if I were to cock the hammer, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the trigger, and I'm going to cock the hammer. I forgot, you can't do that with a 1911, but luckily I loaded a couple extra snap caps in this mag, so I just loaded another snap cap. There's the reset. It's just non-existent travel almost. I'm right on the wall, and then the break. And you could barely see my finger move. It did move just a hair. So trigger, yes, it's got a very, very nice trigger. From a reliability perspective, it was a little bit foul-tempered when we first got it, the first 100 or so rounds. It was kind of ornery. Once we got through that, it has just worked flawlessly since then, and it'll eat just about anything. We tend to feed it CCI mini mags, but you can get, the M12s. There's a whole bunch of variations of ammo out there, and once we got through that initial break-in period, it just works with anything that we want to put in it, which is nice depending on what's available at any given time for 22 ammo. Right now, it's really easy to get a hold of. There was a period of time where 22 was difficult. You just basically took what you got. Well, I've got it sitting here in my hand. Let's talk about the dimensions. It's a full-size 1911, as I mentioned. It's 8.5 inches long, 5.5 inches tall, and 1.25 inches thick. And as I mentioned, it's 35.2 ounces. So it's not a little gun. But you're not going to conceal carry this. That's not what this is for. This is range day, training, practice, just a day of fun. It does come with 10-round magazines, and from the factory perspective, that's what's available, just the 10 rounds. They're really, really solid, robust magazines, nice base plate. These say Sig Sauer because these were actually the Sig Sauer mags, but the GSG and other mags of the same type will work interchangeably. Let's get rid of that snap cap in the chamber so that I can go ahead and show you how to disassemble this thing. Now that's where it can get a little bit weird from a disassembly perspective. It does require tools. It does come with tools. This is the only tool you need. Normally I'll kind of get on a gun that requires a tool for disassembly, but given that this is a range day, a training gun, it's not something that you're intending to go into battle with and try to deal with in the field, it's a little bit more excusable. But basically you use this tool to remove this one screw. And it's kind of a Torx wrench is what this is, and it comes with it. Pull that screw out. Then there's a pin right here that has to come out after you pull out the slide stop slide release, which you line up with this hole, give it a push, pull out the slide stop slide release, and then there's one more pin. And sometimes you just swat it, it'll come out. If not, just take the wrench, pop it out, set the pin aside. At this point, the slide and frame will separate. I'm going to put the slide aside for the moment, show you the frame. The frame's actually really well done. It's got full-length guide rails on both sides, and it has a very, very simple fire control group because it's nothing going on. Your standard 1911 is actually quite simple. And there's your hammer. So not a whole lot going on in there, but everything that is in here is well done. And as I mentioned earlier, it's an aluminum alloy. Now we've got the frame. The slide. This works a lot like a standard 1911, where you remove the bushing, the spring, then you can pull the guide rod out. It's kind of a weird little guide rod. It's got a metal end and then polymer. Actually, no, that's metal as well. And this little bushing. And then, just like any other 1911, the barrel comes out the front, other than most 1911s don't have this little extra hook on it. Now, the gun is a straight blowback gun, which is typical of 22s. And everything in here is well machined and well done. There is a thread protector on here that you can disassemble this barrel assembly, but it's not really designed to put a suppressor or anything on it. There may be adapters available, but it's just really just part of the way the barrel assembly is assembled. May not be able to see very well because I can't get a whole lot of light in here, but you can see that it's well done inside there. It's standard rifling, well machined. Reassembly is as easy as disassembly. Slide the barrel back in, get it to sit in place, put the guide rod back on it. Gotta turn it towards me for just a second, but I had to find the guide rod, put the spring on it, put the bushing back in. Now there is a little bit of a, just like a 1911, it's asymmetrical. This end goes towards the barrel. Get it lined up right. I have it turned. It's kind of hard to do it on camera. If you're doing it just for yourself, it's a lot easier. Make sure the guide rod and spring is seated properly, and then you just slide it back on the frame. To some extent, it's actually easier to put together than a standard 1911. Now at this point, notice I've got the holes lined up. Put my finger back there, you can see the holes are lined up. You need that to be true so that you can put the pin back in. And then you can put this back in. Now one thing you do find, you do have to line up with a little notch, just like a 1911. Every once in a while, it'll want to get stuck. You want to make sure that it goes all the way in and then it goes flush. See how it's pretty much flush? If it sticks out a little bit, what'll happen is the gun will go together and it'll actually cycle maybe once, and then it'll hang up and it can be difficult to get it disassembled. So make sure that's all the way in there. And then put the screw in. Now remember that you're screwing into aluminum, so make sure that it threads, and it threads easily. What I end up tending to do is I drive part way down with just my fingers, and if I can't get it to go with just my fingers, then there's something wrong. It's time to stop. And then again, just drive it down until it's snug. I always use the short end to grip on because it limits the amount of torque I can put on it so I don't accidentally strip it out. This is aluminum, so you want to be careful. That I would say is the only negative to the gun is putting a screw in and out of aluminum. But if you're careful and pay attention to what you're doing, it won't hurt anything. And then now you've got a functional 1911-22 again. So I've mentioned a couple of times that this is basically a full-size 1911, and what I've got here is a full-size 1911. This one happens to be chambered in 45. And put them side by side, they're basically identical. So if you've got your 45 that you want to work with, and that's your gun, but you want to do some practice and you don't want to spend $25 a box on 45 caliber ammo, these kind of look like they're different height. Mainly it's just the shape and the distance, but if I put my finger on them, you'll see that they're almost identical in height. So dimensionally, it is very, very close, which is kind of interesting because a lot of times the 22s were like 2/3 size or something like that. They were kind of a non-standard size. The 1911 22s and the GSG that they're based on are actually full size, regular size. Everything's a dimensional. So instead of $25 a box, you can do $25 all day with 22 to practice, draw, form, things like that. Of course, you're still going to need to practice with some of your whatever, whether you got a 45 or a 9mm, you're going to want to practice with some live ammo for recoil control. But all the fundamentals and basics, or definitely a newbie, this gun gets the job done. So find one, find either the 1911-22 and Sig Sauer or the GSG, and get yourself a really fun gun to own and a fun gun to have. If you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, click that bell if you do. Check us out on Facebook and Patreon, and have a great day. Thank you.